This is the first time in over a century Jack Daniel's has bottled a 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey, marking the first time since the early to mid 1900s that Jack Daniel's has offered up an expression this old.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now, the 14-year is the oldest release in the Jack Daniel's Age series here in 2025. The series also features the return of their 12-year-old Tennessee whiskey. This is batch 3, and their 10-year-old, which is batch 4. So today I'll be breaking down all three, give you all the info you need before you board the hype train, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hype around this. Let's see if it's worth it. Come right back. It's the Mash and Drum. What's up, folks? I'm Jason C. from the Mash and Drum, and welcome back to the show. Like, subscribe, and help me keep climbing to 100,000 subscribers here in the year 2025. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you. The likes in the videos, all the comments you've been leaving has really helped the channel grow as of late, getting towards that 100,000 subscriber milestone. So thank you so much. Okay, so Jack Daniel's launched their Age series in order to complete a pretty lofty goal. Now, going back to pre-prohibition, Jack Daniel's would sell his whiskey with varying high age statements from ages 10 all the way up to 21 years old. When I was down in Tennessee at Jack Daniel's, I was talking with their historian, and they literally showed me a price sheet of all these high age whiskeys. Now, back then it was crazy, the prices. You could buy a 21-year-old Jack Daniel's, a gallon of it, for like $3. I don't know, I don't remember exactly what the price was, but it was really cheap. Now, obviously that was pre-prohibition, but those age statements included a 10-year, a 12-year, a 14-year, an 18-year, and a 21-year. Now, if you're wondering if Jack Daniel's is attempting to also release 18 and 21-year age-stated Tennessee whiskeys in the future, the answer is yes.
I like it a lot.
The idea is to bring all these incredible age statements back if Mother Nature allows it. Now, if you guys may or may not know, aging any whiskey to that high of an age offers a lot of challenges, most notably angel share. Now, angel share is the natural evaporation in a barrel that happens while the whiskey ages over time. So to help mitigate that, Jack Daniel's moves their barrels from the top of the rickhouse, where it's extremely hot for the first 6 to 7 years, to the very bottom of the rickhouse, where it's a lot cooler. In talking with Chris Fletcher, master distiller at Jack Daniel's, he said that that's really the big challenge, is trying to get these Jack Daniel's expressions to these age statements and trying to preserve the quality of whiskey that we've come to know from Jack Daniel's, especially with these recent high age releases. Okay, let's dive into the 10-year first. All three are made up with the Jack Daniel's Classic Tennessee Whiskey mash bill of 80% corn, 12% malted barley, and 8% rye. They're all distilled in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and as you probably know, they are mellowed drop by drop through 10 feet of sugar maple charcoal, just like the classic old number 7 Jack Daniel's. Now, when it comes to the 10-year, Jack Daniel's 10-year-old Tennessee Whiskey Batch 4, it's bottled at 97 proof and will be the biggest release of all three, with some bottles actually going overseas for the first time. Price for the 10-year, it's going to be $84.99 for a 700 milliliter bottle. All right, let's dive into the 10-year. Here we go. Now, I got to be honest, I've tasted this one before, but while I've liked it, I feel like I still rather drink the single barrel proofs over the 10-year. If you like this 10-year age statement, or you've liked the ones in the past, this might be the best one that they've created so far. It's kind of a callback to the first one that they ever released. So there's a lot of cherry in the front of the nose here, kind of a cherry Jolly Rancher note. You still get that baked banana bread, definitely some barrel char here. You still get that Jack Daniel's-esque trail mix with banana chips, I call it. That's kind of like the note I always get in old number 7. I feel like there's a little bit of that DNA in here. So it's kind of like your typical Jack Daniel's banana bread, sweet, a little bit of apple, a little bit of pear, but it's just kind of coated with cherry Jolly Rancher. So let's go for a sip here. Much of the same on the palate. The cherry is very prevalent on the front of the palate, but as it works its way back, it really kind of just transforms into classic Jack Daniel's, where you have your banana chip trail mix, a little bit of a nuttiness comes in. The apple, the pear that is also prevalent in Jack Daniel's comes to the forefront. A little bit of a spicier type of vibe on the back end, even at only 97 proof. Yeah, just that extra layer of cherry, I think, makes the 10-year a little bit different. It stands out from the regular single barrel, not the barrel proof, but the regular single barrel Jack Daniels that are on the shelves as well. I feel like if you're a fan of that in particular, then the 10-year should be a nice step up for those of you that don't want to go up to something for a higher proof. While I do think the 10-year is probably the most least interesting from the lineup that people or whiskey enthusiasts would go to, if you like living under 100 proof, this is probably one of the better 10 years that's come out from Jack Daniels recently, especially with that nice cherry Jolly Rancher note. All right, let's go back to the 12-year. All right, so the Jack Daniels 12-year-old Tennessee whiskey, batch number 3, is bottled at 107 proof and is dropping with a price of $94.99 for, again, a 700 milliliter bottle. All right, so a little bit of the history with the 12-year. Loved batch 1. Batch 1, when it came out a couple years ago, was it was a top 5 whiskey for me that year. Batch 2 was not as crazy about that. It was a little bit more oak forward, and I felt like it lost that sweetness that I loved in batch 1. So the batch 3 now. Batch 3 takes you back to what batch 1 was. So the butterscotch is back, the toffee is back. It's definitely an elevated sweetness, a little bit of kind of a like a cookie dough on the nose as well. Just the slightest hint of a chocolate note. But man, when you compare it to the 10-year, just another couple years, the sweetness, the elevated sweetness that it gets. It's like all those fruit notes that you get in the 10-year and regular Jack Daniels, you know, the pear, the apple, all of a sudden just turns into a toffee, buttery type of experience. And that's what I really loved about the 12-year. And I feel like we're getting back to that with this batch. So, all right, let's go for a taste here. Same thing on the palate here. So you get that banana bread note on the back end, but it's almost like the banana bread has like some walnuts or some almonds in it. There's like a slight hint of like a nuttiness there. But the front it's all loaded with that buttery toffee, almost butterscotchy type of flavor profile that I tend to love. Again, this just takes me back to that first batch that I really loved of the 12. Again, wasn't a big fan last year for the 12-year, but this year it's gotten back to that profile that I love. I don't know, unless you've had some really old Jack Daniels from like the 60s and 70s, you don't really get that buttery toffee note a lot. I mean, sometimes you find it in single barrels, but don't come across it often. I could see this being a lot of folks' favorite just because of that elevated sweetness. And again, being at 107 proof just offers a little bit of a bump compared to the 10-year. If you don't want to drink something below 100 proof, 107, this will give you a little bit more of of kind of a boost in the sweetness profile and also the proof, you know, overall. All right, last sip of this one. And as you keep sipping it, I feel like the sweeter it gets. But this just keeps it going from that sweetness, that elevated sweetness, and it leads right into some really nice barrel char notes, some spice, maybe a hint of a baking spice on the back end, some black pepper, but a really nice long finish that also kind of just completes the experience. It's a great one. I'm really a big fan of the 12-year. And what's good about the 12-year this year is that I think so much attention will be on the 14-year. The 12-year might just be the gem of all three, because with all the attention on the 14-year, the 12-year might be the one that ends up getting slept on a little bit, but we'll see what happens. All right, on to the star of the show, the 14-year. All right, now we will do a final breakdown of just the 14-year. The Jack Daniel's 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey, batch number 1. Now this is bottled at cask strength, hitting a proof of 126.3. There will be roughly 24,000 bottles of this one out on the market. Also, this will be a recurring release just like the 10 and 12 year. So as long as all the whiskey works out, we will see this again next year. Price for this one, $149.99 for a 700 milliliter bottle. Let's dive into the 14 and see if it's worth jumping on the hype train. Here we go. So the nose is just dark and syrupy. It almost comes off like a little bit of a blackstrap rum, where you're talking about these really rich molasses flavors that leads into almost a bitter dark chocolate. It's really, really beautiful on the nose. Just a ton of rich brown sugar on the nose. It's like you carved off the top of a creme brulee and you're just eating the crispy part. The molasses is there for days. Almost gives you some maple syrup vibes as well. There's a touch of smokiness in here. Now the smoke, I think, comes from the barrel char and just that aging process over time. So there is a little bit of a smoke characteristic as you dive deeper into the nose. But again, just 2 more years removed from the 12-year, and we're already seeing another uplift in not only depth of flavor, but sweetness. We're going from toffee butterscotch now to a very rich molasses, almost rum type of unique flavors here. Man, the smokiness is here. A ton of tobacco is on this. I mean, it almost comes off like a cigar, and I think the little bit of a smoke note also leads into that as well. The oak is there, but I feel like the sweetness actually outlasts the oak a little bit. So, all right, let's give it a try. So the proof on this is beautiful. The 126 allows you to taste all these flavors that are in here. Up front, this is just pure, again, it is molasses, it is rummy, it is almost maple syrupy, a little bit of dark chocolate that kind of leads into this charred oak smokiness that you kind of get right at mid palate. And then the back end is spicy tobacco. It is like smoking a spicy cigar. And I feel like a lot of people, if you're a cigar smoker, you're gonna absolutely really dig that about this. Even coming off the 10 and the 12, you could feel that lift in not only proof, but in sweetness as well. The finish goes for days here. This is like taking a cigar and just dipping it in chocolate and molasses at the same time. A spicy cigar. It's a really beautiful profile. I love the upfront sweetness of this. But I can actually see maybe the smokiness and the spiciness of this, kind of that cigar effect that you get on the back end, maybe being a little bit too much for some people. So I could see some folks leaning towards the 12 again, rather than the 14. Now the 14 is a very sexy age statement, but I could see the 12 year being favored over this one because it's a little bit sweeter than this. The sweetness in this, don't get me wrong, is very elevated, but you get this beautiful balance of sweetness up front. Again, that molasses, that chocolate, a little bit of that like that burnt brown sugar creme brulee note, and then it just kind of leads into a smoky, spicy barrel char type of profile on the very back end. So you get kind of these two experiences, but they're also very well in balance. One doesn't really take over the other. It's hard not to hype something like this up because it's the first time you've seen a 14-year age-stated whiskey from Jack Daniel's. Obviously, since pre-prohibition, it's been over 100 years. It's hard not to hype this up because this is a 14-year Jack Daniel's. We haven't seen one, over 100 years. So there's a history component to this bottle as well. And obviously the flavors of this are very well balanced. They're very in your face. Now, the first thing that people in the chat the first thing that people in the comments or you watching will probably ask, is it better than Russell's 15? Is it to a like George T. Stagg level? And what I can say is I'm not sure it would really hang with either of those two, but I think to some it could be in that conversation with a high age, elevated sweetness, great proof point, can be in that conversation. I think it's just gonna depend on where your palate is. I know some folks that really didn't care for Russell's 15. Maybe this will be more along the lines of what they like. That really, really heavy elevated sweetness on the front of the palate, I think is what's gonna make it for a lot of people. But the finish with that spicy cigar note, that's the kicker. And I'm curious to see how people will take to that effect in this whiskey. You can make an argument for some single barrel proof releases and single barrels that are out there that have been picks. Could maybe exceed this for some people, especially if they like the higher proof. But when you're talking about layers of flavors and nuance, this 14-year I feel like is going to be tough to beat. And if you're a Jack Daniel's fan, I think you will absolutely go crazy for this. So let me think about the categories here in the final breakdown for the 14-year, and let's go. All right, let's get into it. The final breakdown here on the Jack Daniel's 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey. Price for this one, $149.99 is the retail price. Resale market value. Now, they already dropped a bunch of these at the White Rabbit bottle shop at Jack Daniel's, and they were already hitting the resale market. Flippers were all over this bottle, and I feel like, unfortunately, flippers are gonna be a majority of the ones trying to gobble these up, because the resale market, in the beginning was about $700. I saw one as high as $800, which is absolute lunacy. I know they're trying to capitalize on being the first to the market to get one of these, but they've already started coming down. So I've seen these as high as about $500 now. I think the price has come down a bit. So resale market right now is probably going to be between $400 to $500. Availability here is obviously going to be limited, only 24,000 bottles. That will probably go really quick. As far as value goes, I know some will probably complain about the $150 price point, but I think those that know the market know that Jack Daniel's always prices their bottles very competitively, and $150 for a 14-year Jack Daniel's at barrel proof, it's a pretty good price. So I'm gonna say the value here is actually good, especially for what I'm tasting in the bottle. So that brings us to the most I'd pay, which is a really important component of this bottle especially. What do I think the highest price I would pay for this one, given that the top tier market is already bringing it to about $400, $500? I do not think it's worth that much. I do really like it. I think it's a great release. However, what's the most I'd pay for this bottle? Given that it's the first time you've seen a 14-year Jack Daniel's in over 100 years, I think that lends itself to paying a little more if I came across it at an elevated price. So I'd be willing personally to go up to maybe $250 for this bottle, but I would not pay any higher than that. And I know that's tough because they tend to go higher than that on the resale market value, but I just wouldn't pay that much for this bottle. Is it really, really good? Yes. Does it give me all the feels and the depth of flavor that I got from Russell's 15 and even the George T. Stagg from last year? I don't know if it's to quite that level. Like I said, it's in the conversation, but I think it is one of the best Jack Daniel's I've ever had. Alternatives to this one is interesting because I think in the past, I would probably recommend Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. But Elijah Craig Barrel Proof the last year or so has really fallen off for me. It's kind of lacked the sweetness, it's lacked the finish and the depth that I'm getting from the Jack Daniel's. So I honestly think the best alternative to the 14 is actually the 12. I think the 12 has the ability to become more favorable as a whiskey than even the 14 to some folks because of that sweetness level, because of the butterscotch and that butteriness that it has. I really do think there are some folks that are gonna love the 12 over the 14. Again, the 14 being spicy, so tobacco forward, that little bit of smoke, even though it does have an elevated sweetness, you know, might be a little bit too much for some folks. So I think the 12 year, if it ends up being more available than the 14, because so much focus will be on the 14, I think the Jack Daniel's 12 year might be the best way to go. However, if you can't find a 12 year either, just grab a Jack Daniel's single barrel proof, especially if they're a store pick. Some of those are absolutely outstanding, and those are gonna be your best alternatives to picking up a Jack Daniel's 14. And lastly, is this a skip, a try before you buy, or a buy and back it up? You know, for me, this is an absolute buy. If you can get it for a good price, I would definitely recommend pulling the trigger. The 14 year is everything that I was hoping it would be, but it's really gonna come down to what you're willing to pay if you see it. So that's really gonna be the big question for a lot of you. And I'm kind of wondering down below in the comments, you guys let me know if you did happen to come across one of these, what you would be willing to pay. Always love hearing from you guys. And with that, I think, yeah, this is gonna be a great release. And if you're lucky enough to get one, I think it's gonna really impress you. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the review for the Jack Daniel Age series here in 2025. We took a look at the 10 year, the 12 year, and of course the 14 year. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram. Let me know down in the comments what you think. What would you be willing to pay for the 14 year if you do come across it? Just based on the tasting notes, would you be interested in the 10 or the 12 over the 14? Always love hearing from you guys. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. Cheers, and I'll see you next time right here on The Master and Drum.